second guessing yourself and thinking that people are going to say no to you, and just do it anyway and see what happens.
I live and die by the saying, don't ask, don't get.
I think at that early stage where we were talking about what can you do to grow awareness, I was really quiet and I didn't fully back myself. I'll do the website myself. I'll, do the influencer marketing myself. I think that's such a strong trope of young women who are starting a business. It's like, no, it's okay, it's fine. I'll just do it all myself, because we're so used to doing everything ourselves.
What are kind of some key things that you've learnt about storytelling that you think every brand or individual should be doing?
Miss America pageant where you've got all the states coming together and they ask them to answer these questions on the spot. And she said the ones that are most effective are when they tell a story. At the end of the day, if you have a message that you want to share, whether it is making someone laugh, making someone feel something, or teaching someone something, you can do all of that through a story.
What are your 3 non-negotiables when it comes to engaging with a Gen Z audience?
If you are a company or a startup or a founder and you're not
Milly, welcome to Top of Mind. Thank you so much for giving up your morning to chat to me, because I know at the moment you're in the midst of a huge campaign that you are running. So thank you for spending an hour with me this morning.
That's okay. I'm happy to be here. This looks amazing. So good.
I'm so excited that you're here because I want to get into so much of what you do. You obviously run a mental health charity for Gen Z, but you talk a lot about, your personal branding, storytelling, the importance of that. So I'm going to get into all of that. But I thought the best place to start when I was doing some research was your Instagram bio says, talk to me about psychology, branding, and Gen Z.
Yeah.
Why those 3 topics?
It's taken a really long time to narrow those things down. I think I've been caught up in the whole idea of a niche and trying to as a personal brand, do your best to try and explain to people who have just come across your profile or have seen little bits and pieces of you but have come to find out more. Try and explain to them and encapsulate what it is that you care about, what you're good at and what you're skilled at, or just what you're passionate about too. And also signal to people that might hire you as well or engage you in projects. And so psychology, obviously, because I run a Gen Z mental health charity, and I've done a bit of research and studies in psych. I don't have a psych degree, or I'm not a psychologist, but I do have a bit of subject matter expertise there. And then Gen Z, because I live and breathe that generation. Technically, I'm right on the cusp. I'm a bit of a zillennial, as some of my employees like to remind me. I'm like, hello, try and go get a boomer boss. I'm barely millennial. And then when I speak to, millennial friends and colleagues, they're like, yeah, you're so Gen Z. So I'm right on the cusp there, but I did, essentially grow up online like the rest of Gen Z did. So I can definitely relate to that experience. And then branding, because I've been doing that since I can remember. I did a journalism media comms degree. I didn't really like it at all. And I feel like the only good piece of advice that they gave me from that was to start a personal brand early. As soon as we sat down in our, first few lectures of that journalism degree, news writing, all of that kind of stuff went right out of one ear from one ear to the other. But the personal branding stuff really landed with me. I think they kind of more meant, if you go into presenting or reporting, it's great to, start a Twitter or a LinkedIn. And I was like, yeah, I get that. But what about all these people that are making money from their personal brand and they're up-leveling in their career as a result of the stuff that they're signaling to the world, like, hey, I'm here, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm good at, this is what I love. And so I've just tried to replicate that ever since I learned about that. And I think your personal brand is something that obviously evolves and is shaped as you grow as a human being and your life changes, but also as your career progresses as well. And I like the flexibility of that and the control over that to be able to explain to the world who you are.
I love that. And I think if there's one thing that I wish that I had learned at university, I think there's a few years between us in terms of age, but I think there's one thing that I say all the time that I wish I had learned was around personal branding, because I kind of had to figure it out on my own in terms of, you know, I was probably the first person to jump on LinkedIn and start talking about stuff, and everyone was like, what are you doing? Like, this is a professional platform.
Yeah.
So how did you find your feet coming out of university with your personal brand? What did you start talking about? How did you kind of find what you felt good talking about?
Yeah, that's a tough question because I feel like I'm still, although we've just covered the fact that I've presented these 3 words in my Instagram bio to the world to try and explain like who I am and what I do.
If you love this episode, help us to grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a review.
I'm still struggling to pin it down. And sometimes I'm quite envious of the people who have, you know, really solidified their brand as, you know, a personal chef or someone who supports young women coming out of domestic violence situations. Like I love it when people are able to pin down, this is the one thing that I do and I do it really well. So I have always found it difficult to narrow that down. But I think, as I said, it grows with you as a human being and the life that you're living at that time. So when I came out of university, I was actually overseas. I did an exchange year because I hated uni that much and I really wanted to travel. But I also wanted to finish the degree because I'd paid for it. Well, the Hex was paying for it, which I'm still going to pay off.
Yeah.
So I did that exchange year and I did it in San Jose, just outside of San Francisco. And I that was the only choice that I had in the US. So I went there and it was great, and I essentially just started traveling basically like around the States and found friends in different pockets. And so when I came out of university, I was essentially a travel blogger, and this was 2017. And I feel like that was really the peak of influencer marketing in terms of that initial boom.
Yeah.
And so after that, I moved straight to New York because that was kind of where I kept coming back to every month or two, where all the big events were, all the big brand HQs were. And so I was really just in this lifestyle travel space. And like I still do now, I was constantly just looking to the people out there online who were doing what I wanted to do and were doing it well. And I was like, okay, I'll buy their courses. I'll learn how to do what they do. I'll get better at, you know, taking photos like they do. I'll buy their presets. I'll get the camera. Whatever they suggest, I'll do it. And then I'll figure out my own little kind of spin on that as I go. And that's basically what I did. And at that time, I know everyone says it, but it was really true. Like, it was a lot easier to get noticed, to grow. That was when we had static images only. Can you imagine? No stories, no videos, no reels.
The dream.
The dream. Like, are
Take
you
me back.
kidding me? Oh, and I used to have so much fun. A lot of people who have followed me for a while will laugh about this, but I had so much fun learning Photoshop and Lightroom and all the presets and stuff. And so I would add, you know, like beautiful sunsets and birds. Like, I became known for adding like little like flying pockets of birds in the background.
Stop.
And like adding bits of light like coming through just to like, you know, make the photo come alive.
Yeah.
And I loved that so much. I loved it. So that was a great time.
Yeah.
And brands were spending a lot of money on influencer marketing. So I went on a bunch of cool trips.
Amazing.
And I just was kind of living that glamorous, I say, quote unquote, because it looked glamorous. But I was earning like not a lot of money at all because that was my only source of income, and, you know, living in a shoebox and really struggling. But I think the struggle was part of the fun as well, or I say that looking back.
Yeah.
So that's where I was at then. And then, which we'll kind of talk to, I'm assuming, in your next couple of questions. But after that, I kind of figured that I wanted to create a brand outside of myself as well, because that's what the other, you know, lifestyle travel bloggers were doing at that time. And I wanted to take that next step, which is kind of the initial step that I took to get to where I am today with AllKnd.
But before AllKnd was GirlKnd.
Yeah.
And I want to ask, was a charity for Gen Z always on the cards? Like, was it always something that you looked at and you were like, that's something that I would love to do? Not sure how I'm going to get there, but I'd love to do it. Is it something that was always on the cards?
Yeah, pretty much. I think at that time I was, as I said, I was struggling. I was living on the other side of the world to my family and close friends, and didn't have the resources that I needed to kind of live a comfortable life. And yeah, struggling is, you know, romantic and fun for a bit. But I was kind of coming to the point where my mental health wasn't doing great. And so I started, like a lot of people during that time, started seeking out information on social media from, you know, those early therapy is cool hashtag profiles. And that's when we kind of first started talking about mental health online. And I also sought support for myself as well via like telehealth therapy. And so I started at the same time as I was doing this personal brand. It's really ironic because, you know, I was going, you know, traveling and all these glamorous things. And then on the inside, I was feeling all this stuff and kind of trying to manage my well-being at the same time as learn more about how I was in high school and what anxiety meant and all of those kinds of things. And so I then started digging a little deeper into the conversations that were happening. I connected with a psychologist back in Brisbane who I still work with today. And yeah, kind of just followed this interest of mine, followed this passion and something that directly related back to my own experience and my own kind of journey of understanding myself. And so I was like, okay, I'm not exactly of an age where I can be this kind of life coach person. I was literally like 21, 22. Can you imagine?
Like,
oh my gosh.
I can change your life.
Yeah. And so, but I still really wanted to help young women. Obviously only excluded young male identifying people because I wasn't male identifying and I felt like I couldn't speak to that experience of growing up. So I was like, okay, I really want to stick to young women and I want it to be this kind of everything you didn't learn in school type approach to getting some experts on board, such as the people that I'd started researching and contacting in my circles who were, in psychology, mentoring, skincare, menstrual health, like everything to do with the stuff that we didn't really learn at school, especially back then when I was in school. And so kind of interviewed all of them and then brought all of that into this like core online learning hub / community, and I called it GirlKnd. And I did this cute little launch in New York and like had sunflowers in these like goodie bags, and I loved it. I loved building a brand. And so it was GirlKnd for a really long time. And then when I came back home to Australia because of COVID, I wanted to kind of start fresh and start again and reset based on the learnings that I'd had from GirlKnd. And then that's when AllKnd was born.
I love that. Now, I want to really touch on the fact that, you know, that the irony isn't lost on me where you're, you know, very much focused on building a mental health positive or educational platform, but the main channel that you use to do that is social media. And at the same time, you're promoting these big brand trips and, you know, as you said, glamorous trips that, you know, aren't very glamorous when you look a little bit deeper, but on the surface they are. So I think, you know, I know that there was a YouGov poll recently that revealed that majority of Australians believe that social media directly impacts their poor mental health or has a direct effect on their mental health. So how do you balance that now being a charity for Gen Z mental health, but your main platforms that you talk and communicate to this audience on is something that most people are blaming for the decline of their mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a massive oxymoron and I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. I actually where for this campaign that we're doing right now, and we'll be doing later in the year as well, we're working with Instagram, and it's kind of interesting because of exactly what you just said. And there's a beautiful young woman at Meta who I've had a couple meetings with and have spoken to, and she actually used to work for the Butterfly Foundation, which is the eating disorder organisation here in Australia. They do amazing work. And she moved over to Meta, and I was like, how on earth did that happen? And she's like, well, like, I want to be able to change things from the inside. And so last week I actually went to her partnership launch between Instagram and the Butterfly Foundation to kind of, work on policy, to work on safety features, to get creator voices to kind of champion this message. And so I found that really interesting. And essentially that's exactly what we're trying to do with AllKnd. It's funny because when I first started AllKnd, I was thinking about, okay, well, we have this one product that we are targeting young Australians with, and it's peer-to-peer mental health first aid training. That's the one thing that we do, and we do it well. And, at the end of the day, we want as many young Australians to go through this training so that they know how to support each other and themselves safely. And so let's target high schools because, this is where you have, a bunch of young Aussies in one group at the same time. We can get the schools to mandate it as part of, year 10, 11, 12 curriculum. And we found it so, so difficult to get it past the guidance officers and the counsellors. They thought it was great, the people who are in the space and deal with young people, and chat to them every day about their mental health. But as soon as you go up the decision-making ladder, you're faced with a bunch of red tape. So end of last year, we gave up and we were like, okay, well, it's actually interesting what we've been trying to do because we've kind of circumvented the actual point, which is to reach young people. Like we can talk to them directly on social media. They're on our Instagram profile. Like we can, chat to them and meet them where they're at. And that's when we kind of came up with the idea of this campaign that's, rolling out at the moment. If we want to build this community on Instagram and social media channels, to be able to ideally at the end of the day, convert them into trained good mates is what we call them, who have done their training. Why don't we also work with creators who are basically the modern day community leader? Like this is the type of person that young people are looking up to, not just for, inspiration, but also for their own kind of personal identity shaping, their views and values and beliefs about the world and themselves. And so if we can get creators on board to help share this message, then we're reaching far more young people than we would have if we burnt ourselves out trying to get into high schools. And at the same time, it's like, well, if your teacher's telling you to do something versus the creator that you follow religiously online because you absolutely adore, like, know and trust them, you're far more likely to engage with the content over there. We have more control of the message. We're able to, do things in our own way instead of the very traditional and conservative approach to preventative youth mental health, where it's very curriculum heavy and, somewhat dry and heavy and top down. We're able to kind of weave in our sense of humour, a bit of cheek and wittiness, and not only make young people feel seen and heard and safe within our community, but also, teach them what they need to know to be safe.
I love that. I love that. It's almost like, it's the epitome of the saying, like, if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah,
and I
much.
think, you're so right as well. Like I do a lot of talks in schools and a lot around personal branding and, talking at career nights and things like that. And it's so funny because all of the students that come up to me afterwards or the parents that come up to me afterwards, they're like, it was great, really interesting, we learn a lot. And then the teachers are like, we've been saying this for months and no one listens, but you have like a third party come into a school and talk about it. and it changes. So it's like, you know, it's someone that's a little bit more relatable. It's not an authority figure and things like that. So I find that so interesting. So with that then, taking a step back a little, you mentioned that you started AllKnd, which essentially was what you're doing now, but for females only.
Pretty much, yeah.
When you launched both, AllKnd and then relaunched as AllKnd, tactically, where did you start when it came to getting the message out there about what you're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I know that it often feels really overwhelming and like there's no one answer, which is pretty much the case, right? So I just wasn't ready to let go of AllKnd. So that became a sub-brand of AllKnd, because I knew that one day, once we built the community up, wanted to be able to partner with, you know, female skewed brands, because that was still a real passion of mine. We've since basically just, you know, disintegrated AllKnd and basically absorbed it into AllKnd, because it just didn't make sense anymore to have the separate groups. It went against our values of inclusivity. So it's much easier now just to work with AllKnd and you know, formerly AllKnd, people kind of still know me for AllKnd. But when we launched that, I actually went, this was October 2021, so almost 3 years ago now.
Mid-COVID, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, mid-COVID. So because of my experience, you know, in influencer marketing, I went straight to creators who were, you know, friends of mine who were already, you know, we already had a profile on Instagram. It wasn't like, surprise, AllKnd is now a thing. It was like, okay, AllKnd is here. We're going to properly launch it in October, but it was already existing. So we had a few people engaging. And so, yeah, I actually just put kind of a few call outs to get some creators on board. And I literally just sent them a hat. Like I sent them a hat that said AllKnd, because that was like all I could afford at that time. And, you know, printed out some postcards, and I can't even remember what else was in their little package, and just asked them to like share it on social media. And so I went, because we were still trying to approach schools at that time, I did a bit of a cross section of like, okay, who are our market segments? You know, we've got schools, parents, teachers. We've also got young people themselves. And then also, you know, community leaders, so creators and influencers. And so I did a bit of a cross section and approached, you know, mothers who did a bunch of kind of family content, some teachers, some young influencers, the whole cross section, and just kind of did a bit of a spray and pray approach, and just wanted to get more followers, basically, to start actually building some momentum and getting some, you know, people through the Good Mate training program. It worked a little bit, not great. We're still
More
really
praying.
small. Yeah. We're still really small. I think we'll get a bit of traction through this campaign.
Yep.
Because we've been able to work with some, you know, bigger names. And I think by sharing a lot of the stuff back then around like, this is what I'm doing, this is behind the scenes, this is how we're starting. And I was always conscious of sharing behind the scenes because it related directly back to my personal brand. People have kind of seen that evolution and they're like, oh, okay, AllKnd is now well and truly alive. They're grown up. And this latest evolution has really been signaling that. Like, we've changed a bunch of the kind of look and feel. The language is a lot more direct, less apologetic. It's like, no, we're done fucking around. Like, I have put in the hard yards. I have done my learnings, although I will never be done learning, but I've made so many mistakes. And I'm kind of at the point now where my word of the year was conviction this year, because I'm like, stop fucking apologizing, you know, and second guessing yourself and thinking that people are going to say no to you, and just do it anyway and see what happens. And that's exactly how this campaign has unfolded. I literally, like, you know, went and sat down with, you know, someone at Instagram at an event I was at, and I was like, literally I sat down, like stopped them. Hi, I'm Milly and this is what I do. I've been trying to email you, but you haven't emailed me back. I've been trying to DM you, and let's actually chat. And she's like, okay, sure. And I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like
I
just
love
ask.
Absolutely. I mean, I live and die by the saying, don't ask, don't get.
Yeah. So true.
And because so many people are scared to ask, when you do ask, it's not actually as bad as you think it's going to be. And I think, you know, I actually had this conversation yesterday with somebody who was like, hey, we would like you to help us start our podcast because we've seen yours and we really like it. And I was like, he said, you know, should I just test it and test it out on YouTube or whatever? And I was like, why don't you just test it out doing the real thing? Because if the test works, you can continue going.
Yeah.
Like you don't half-ass it.
Exactly
Just
right.
go all in.
Yeah. So true. And I think at that early stage where we were talking about what can you do to grow awareness, I think I was too safe. Like I think I was, again, too apologetic around like, hi, sorry, it's just me. I'm just launching a brand. I'm really sorry. I was really quiet and I didn't fully back myself. And I think because I didn't, it's a bit of a dichotomy because you don't have the resources to create exactly what you want. You have to kind of do done is better than perfect. And so there's this kind of struggle there with like, okay, well, I'm not exactly like thrilled with the final product, but it's done.
But it's
so
better.
I have to launch it.
Better than what I don't have.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's better than what I don't have. It's done. But then you also have to go, you know what, people are still going to find value in it, even though it's not perfect. And I really struggle with that as a ongoing perfectionist. So I was too safe. I was too apologetic and I didn't ask for what I wanted. I was like, no, I can do this all myself. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll do the website myself. I'll, you know, do the influencer marketing myself. I didn't ask favors of people. I didn't ask people to jump on board as partners. I didn't really have very strong KPIs. I was kind of just working by myself as well. There was no collaboration. And I think that's such a strong trope of young women who are starting a business. It's like, no, it's okay, it's fine. I'll just do it all myself because we're so used to doing everything ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're so, I can't think of another word other than apologetic for taking up space and launching something into the world and asking for things. It's not really in our nature. It's hard.
I couldn't resonate with something more if I tried. I think, and I really want to go down that path of, you know, being a female founder and there's a lot of similarities that you and I have in that space. But I think before we get there, you mentioned you made a lot of mistakes. Obviously, some of the ones that you just touched on around being too safe or, you know, just being too apologetic. Were there other kind of mistakes that you've made that you're like, if anyone else was to do this again, this is what you should do differently?
I spent a lot of, well, not heaps of money. I'm pretty frugal around that kind of stuff, but I only started paying myself from the charity. A lot of people get confused about the structure of a charity. It's essentially a business, but no one owns it. So you have to have a minimum of 3 board directors. One of them is myself, and we actually have a few more, which are all women, and they're fucking fantastic. But yeah, so they could vote me out at any time. They could say, you're not doing a good job as managing director, you're the founder, but it doesn't matter because this charity belongs to the public. Everything we do is for the public, which is also funny because I'm actually not building any equity in this business either. My equity is fully in my personal brand, which is why I'm hellbent on creating such a strong personal brand, which I think you should do regardless. And so we're allowed to pay staff. All of those decisions are made by the board collectively, votes and that kind of sign off kind of stuff. But we didn't have any money, so there was nothing to decide. Like, we should probably give Milly, you know, a bit of a salary or a part-time salary, but we have no money. So as soon as we started getting some donations in from corporate and community philanthropy, sponsorships, that kind of thing, which is what we run off essentially, I was able to start paying myself a salary like literally a year and a half ago. So before that, it was the bank of me, and I didn't actually know whether I'd ever be paid back for it. So I was very frugal is the point of that. But I probably didn't do enough research. I think I kind of, like I said, I followed a bunch of people online and did their courses and felt like I didn't have time or energy to do much more than that. And so I kind of was like, okay, whatever they suggest, the kind of software or tech stacks, whatever they suggest, I'll just pay the subscription and the numbers will come. And I had this idea that if you build the business and make it look like a business, people will come. But in actual fact, you can make something look like a business and there's absolutely nothing going on behind the facade. And I'm good at making things look like a business. Like I love branding. That's my whole thing. But in terms of the operational stuff, in terms of sales, that stuff I find a lot harder and it does not come naturally to me at all. And so I think when you start a business, yes, the look and feel, the brand, the logo, the Instagram posts, all of that is way more exciting and it makes you look like you have a functioning business. But I think spend a bit more time on the actual behind the scenes stuff because there's no point having the brand if there's nothing going on behind it because you'll eventually run out of money and you won't be able to pay your graphic designer or your email subscription service. So that's probably my biggest learning. And then also just collaborating and asking people around you. Like obviously there's a tactful way to do that. And I'm a believer that, you know, always be of help to other people because those good deeds will kind of come back around, not necessarily from that person, like never do anything because you think that you'll get something in return. But I think that kind of push and pull of the universe or whatever always comes back around to you with favors.
Hey guys, if you are listening on Spotify, do not forget to give us a 5-star rating. It will help us to reach more people.
And I often seek advice, not just from, you know, our board members who are essentially my advisors, but, you know, people out in the community as well who are doing really cool, or in the industry, I should say, who are doing really cool things. I often seek advice from them and I feel like I take. But at the same time, I often give to people who are coming up, or are in their career a few steps behind as well. And that kind of full circle always happens. And I really believe that you should always take advantage of that and also save other people time and energy as well, wherever you can, by passing on your learnings too.
Yeah. I think that's it's important, right? It's something that I struggle with and have struggled with the last few years since being in business. You know, I've had friends that have watched me or people that I've worked with previously watch me start a business and then, you know, you get an email or a text being like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. And I'm like, I am, the number one value in my business is to help, right?
Yeah.
If my team leave a phone conversation with a potential client, a client existing, you know, one of our suppliers or anything like that, and they go, they weren't helpful, we failed, right? Or even if they don't work with us, even if they don't sign with us, even if they don't sign the scope of work, if we weren't helpful, we failed. But I really struggle with the balance of being helpful to everybody, but then still making time for my own self.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I could, if I had endless amounts of energy, just constantly help and give advice. And so how do you balance that? Obviously being a charity as well, you've got this extra layer of wanting and needing to help as many people as possible. How do you balance that, I suppose, equation of wanting to help as many people as possible and wanting to share, you know, the learnings that you've had from a business, but also from a mental health point of view, but then also protecting your own space and your own energy to make sure that you've got enough energy to keep showing up?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff you can do personally behind the scenes to be like, okay, I'm not going to go on my phone at this time. Like at the end of the day, your phone is just a tool and you can put it down. That's a whole nother conversation because we're addicted and it's technically not our fault. But in terms of, you know, that conversational pull towards, hey, can I pick your brain or can I, you know, hear about your story, all of that kind of stuff. From experience of people coming to me with that kind of thing, I can now use that when asking for help from other people. Is that you should always be really clear with your ask. Like clarity is kindness. So if someone comes to me with a, hey, can I pick your brain over coffee? It's like, I don't think I really have time for that. Whereas if they come with a really clear ask of like, hey, can I shoot this email pitch over to you and see what you think?
Yeah.
Leave me a couple of, you know, pieces of feedback or change a couple of things. It's like, yeah, no worries, I can do that. Because it's not overwhelming. It's like, okay, I know exactly what I need to invest in this ask and I know that I can do it. And I will take that and use it with people that I need support from as well. Like, hey, I know you're really busy, but what I really need and what would be really helpful to me right now is if you could connect me with this person.
Yes.
Just an email connect.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's so much easier that way.
I agree. And I think there's this huge misconception that like getting a coffee is easier.
No,
and it's
not.
just not.
It's too overwhelming. Like, I would genuinely love to have coffee with you. Like, do not get me wrong. I would love to sit down and talk about your goals and your dreams and what you want to do to help the world. But like that, I'm too overwhelmed. Like, I can't. I actually can't. Maybe in like 3 months when the campaign's not happening. But again, like, I don't want to let you down either. And I don't want to be distracted. Like, I'd rather you just come to me with an ask, even if it is like, you know, a 20-minute like meet up or whatever it is. At least it's clear and concise and I know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. Now, I think where I want to go now is kind of your, you know, you've spoken about your personal brand, and it's quite evident if you look on any of, you know, the channels that you have as a person or as a business or charity, that storytelling is kind of really pivotal to what you do as an individual, but also as a brand. You know, you mentioned you went to uni for journalism, and I think that, you know, in my mind there's a really natural connection there between telling good stories and being able to, you know, allow people to resonate with your story or connect with your story. What are kind of some key things that you've learnt about storytelling that you think every brand or individual should be doing?
I remember this, I don't remember a lot from uni, to be honest, but the one kind of lecture or the 30 seconds of this one lecture that stood out to me over the whole degree was this one on storytelling, and only the one sentence. And the lecturer, she was great, but she had this really poignant piece of advice or this one story that, it was a story that stood out to me and helped me kind of grasp the concept of storytelling. She said something around the like Miss America pageant where you've got all the states coming together, and they ask the pageant members, the
Participants,
Miss Texas or whatever.
Yeah.
They ask them to answer these questions on the spot, and she said the ones that are most effective, because they have to come up with them on the spot, are not the rambling kind of, oh, well, the world's facing a hunger crisis and we should all be more kind to each other and da-da-da-da-da. That's not memorable. The ones that are really impactful are when they tell a story. So if they get asked, hey, Miss Texas, how do you think we should fight, the kindness crisis across the world and the stress that we're all facing and why we're all being so mean to each other? The way that you should answer that is with a story. And so Miss Texas says, you know, when I was 5, my grandpa sat me down and I remember this really clearly because da-da-da-da-da, and he taught me that, you know, kindness comes from da-da-da. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know why that really landed with me, but that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. And if we think about it, stories are the way that we've been learning and sharing forever. Like, we didn't have the resources and the storytelling tools that we have now way back when all we had was, you know, our ancestors telling stories to help us learn about the world, to teach us how to be safe, how to, you know, get food, water, shelter, how to stay alive. And so now storytelling looks really, really different. But I still think at the end of the day, if you have a message that you want to share, or you have value that you want to offer, whether it is, you know, making someone laugh, making someone feel something, or teaching someone something, you can do all of that through a story.
And then to add another layer on that, you're obviously so deep in the Gen Z world. How does storytelling to Gen Zs differ? Because I feel like Gen Z have really broken the mold of everything that I've grown up learning as a marketer. and they've broken all of those kind of traditional systems and processes that, you know, typical marketers would rely on to guarantee a success of a product or a service or a campaign. How have you learned that Gen Z, not only with storytelling, but marketing to Gen Zs changes?
I think Gen Z really want to be the main character. Like they really do think that they're the main character in their stories, which is a great way to go about the world. But we're also really passionate about social causes. So therefore it's a lot harder to trust brands now. And the transparency needs to be there. The actual strength to a brand's kind of credibility and honesty and impact in the world needs to be there. And so I think the behind the scenes storytelling element of brands is really successful online at the moment. We do it. We, you know, started our pre-campaign storytelling like 2-3 months out before we launched it. And we kind of set up this weekly task for our team to come in on a Tuesday, and we sat down and we'd write the script, and it would be based on, you know, what we were doing at the time in terms of preparing for our launch. We were, you know, finishing up the research and curriculum, and then we were rebranding, and then we were going to film the training and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. We were meeting up with creators. We were traveling, all of that. Every week we'd have a new story to tell, and we were all characters in that story. We even had, you know, off-screen characters like our executive officer, Paul, who's 50. And we love him and we love including him in the story, even though he's not really on screen. It's like being able to refer to that other character off screen. And I recently did a kind of presentation to a bunch of social impact founders who are at the early stage of their business, around how to storytell if you don't really have a team and you don't have this kind of glamorous office to film those behind the scenes moments. And it's like, well, use what you have. Like one person in the workshop was like, oh, well, I find it really difficult because I have 2 young kids. And I'm like, use that. Like obviously you don't need to show, you know, the behind the scenes of your personal life and your children online, but use them as characters. Like that's your boss. Like your 2-year-old is your boss. Like use them as the characters in your story, and include what you can. Even the most mundane moments of your life can make really great visuals for people. I think we've become really nosy since the pandemic of like people don't really share the glamorous stuff anymore because all of that ended, and we got used to the fact that we were seeing the inside of people's living rooms and bedrooms. And not saying you necessarily have to film in your home, but like if it's just you journaling at a coffee shop or something, like you can use whatever you have. And I would always encourage, you know, people to get used to the idea of like propping your phone up, you know, whatever it is you're doing, folding laundry. Like people want to sit with you in that moment. You can add a voiceover, you can speak to camera. Like it doesn't have to be super complicated. It can just be you in that moment sharing what you have. It might be your struggles that week of like, hey, like, you know, our graphic designer submitted, you know, something that really wasn't up to standard. I don't really know what to do. Does anyone have any advice? Or here's what I'm thinking. Here's what they presented. Like all of that stuff's super interesting to people. I find it really interesting to people. And if you look at brands online, like Shameless Podcast has been doing this a lot, TBH Skincare, Emco Beauty, that's all very like beauty media skewed because that's my For You page, but you'll notice a lot of brands doing it. And we love it. We lap it up because I want to see inside a corporate office. I do. I really do. I love seeing what they eat every day, what they wear. It's really interesting to me. And so that can literally be your story. Your story is your real life. It doesn't have to be this made up version with all of these complicated characters and scenes and all of that kind of stuff. It's just literally use what you have, get your phone out and capture exactly what you're doing in the moment because we love to see it.
And where do you think people go wrong with storytelling? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that just don't know where to start, and you're right, you know, capture what you can or do what you can do with the tools that you have. Where do you think people go wrong with it?
I think it's probably obviously overcomplicating it.
Yeah.
Because that becomes further and further from reality, and people, especially Gen Z, will be able to sense that straight away. I think also trying to remember that everyone has really short attention spans as well. And so when we were sharing our story, you know, I'd often say like, okay, this week we should maybe do this. And then my employees who I work super closely with, our social media team, they're kind of like, no, but like we've been talking about this for so long, people are going to probably be impatient, or they'll be bored, or they'll be questioning this. And so it's like always coming back to how's my audience feeling right now? Like, are they fatigued by, you know, the information that I'm sharing because it's been the same for a few weeks now, or has something happened globally that maybe is shifting their attention? Like, what is going on in the world of my consumer right now that maybe shifting their attention, and how do I address that? Maybe not directly, but in a way, a roundabout way, or what can I offer to kind of steer clear completely of my product related stuff this week or for a month, and just really get to the heart of some issues that I really care about. Totally depends what kind of industry you're in, but I think you can always tap into what we're feeling as human beings, and not just as consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that in mind, then you obviously, as I said, spend a lot of time in the world of Gen Z. If there are brands that are listening to this, what is the best way that, I would say, what are your like 3 non-negotiables when it comes to engaging with a Gen Z audience?
Have your why really, really clear, and know that everything you do as a business, who you work with, your values, your founder story, your staff, all of that is going to be, you know, put on show when you have a Gen Z consumer. Like, they will dig if they need to dig. Like, don't give them a reason to dig, but at the same time, like, they can, you know, understand who you are and what you do very, very quickly. Tap into their trends, because ultimately Gen Z is setting the trends that we're seeing on social media. Like, they are their own marketing machine, which is like really hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But tap into their trends, but do it in your way as well. Don't try and like be them, like just be you, but also at the same time acknowledge the trends and their interests at the same time. And you can do that creatively. And then also be a business that has an element of social impact too. Like, even if you're, you know, really far away from that world, like, you know, you're selling shampoo or something, like you can always find a way to tie your business values and your message and even your revenue back into some sort of social impact cause. Because I think that's now a bit of a non-negotiable. I think that's kind of, a must have for businesses who are speaking to Gen Z.
It's actually really funny that you mentioned that. There was a study that I was reading a month or 2 ago that came out that talked about the top 5 priorities for people in kind of workplace satisfaction. And in the 5 things, money wasn't mentioned at all. But as one of those 5 items, it came down to ensuring that what they did had an impact, or they were connected to the end goal of what that business or that organisation was working towards. So I think you're so right in that sense that, you know, regardless of whether you're Gen Z or anyone else for that matter, people are looking for that kind of connection to purpose in the work that they're doing to feel that overall satisfaction for work balance or happiness or fulfillment.
Absolutely. And if you are a company or a startup or a founder and you're not Gen Z, speak to Gen Z, like hire Gen Z, use them as the experts. I don't think it's worth guessing because Gen Z are just so fatigued. Like, they're so tired, they're over the bullshit. You have to kind of cut through the crap. There's a lot going on in the world as well, especially for Gen Z. It's a very scary place in terms of thinking about their future. you have to acknowledge those elephants in the room,
Yeah.
because otherwise you'll just be another business that they roll their eyes at. That's the harsh truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward then, what are your predictions for the mental health space in the next few years? And second to that, what are your predictions with the Gen Z audience or community, and perhaps how we communicate with them moving forward?
Yeah, interesting. So in terms of mental health, I really just focus on Australia because it was really nice moving home from the States during COVID and being able to just focus nationally on the mental health of our country and the young people here in our own backyards, because we, grew up differently to young people in other parts of the world. And it's been really interesting to kind of, look at the budget, the federal budget that came out last night, and look at the allocation of funding for that. And Matt Berryman, who was the chair of mental health, who just quit a few months ago because he'd been rallying for 3 years to do more in the space of mental health in terms of the people in power, and became frustrated and ultimately left. So it's a scary thought to think that, we're not really getting the action that mental illness in Australia deserves. I do have the privilege of being on the preventative end of the scale though. So I kind of sit in this space of hope where we have young people who obviously really care about mental health. I'm sure mental health came up in those concerns around the workplace and what young people really need from their employers and their occupations. They obviously really care, because if it's not impacting them, it's impacting their best friend. We know that 2 in 5 people in a group chat of young people are not doing well. They're struggling with their mental health. And when I approached creators for our campaign that we're doing, like Ella Watkins, Lily and Georgia McCudden, Taz and Alessia, for example, James Parr, I approached them with their own statistics, and I said, okay, you've got, 550,000 young Australians following you online, and 200,000 of them are not doing well. They're struggling with their mental health and they're following you. So I'm approaching you because I already know that you have spoken about and care about mental health, and you're Gen Z and your community is Gen Z. So let's just have the conversation. And so I think we'll be seeing a bit more of that coming up online as we kind of get through, the tough stuff that's happening in the world overseas. Here we've got a lot of social issues to address, and all of it really comes back to mental health and preventative early intervention mental health. And that's really where we need to be focusing a lot of the funding too. So that would be really, really great to see. And it would be amazing to get, to reach our goal of training at least one young person in every Australian classroom, sports team, workplace, group chat in that preventative peer-to-peer mental health first aid, because we can kind of estimate the ripple effect of that, and those cohorts of young people who are coming up to become our new leaders. And so in terms of Gen Z, we are obviously going to see them stepping into those positions of power, which is really, really exciting. I think I'm really confident in that generation because they are so hard and fast passionate about making the world one that they want to live in, not just for them, but for their children too. I think we're at this generational split. Millennials are kind of in the grey area, this no man's land. But in terms of, our Gen X and our Gen Z, they're worlds apart. And those positions of power now are filled by those people that do not understand this next generation at all, simply because they didn't live the life of Gen Z growing up online and facing these issues that their elders have kind of left for them to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's a really sensitive and complex topic and subject, but I think we're going to be speaking more about it. We've never seen more interest in the Gen Z population before, not just as consumers, but as colleagues and as those decision makers who are eventually going to step into power. So I'm excited. I'm confident. I'm really, really confident. And I honestly cannot wait. I think it's about time.
I couldn't agree more. And before we go to the final 3 questions, which I ask everybody who joins me on this podcast, I know you're kind of at the 2,700 mark in terms of good mates trained. Is that the stat that I saw? Yeah. Out of 10,000?
We've actually just reset the clock because we've relaunched Good Mate training.
Okay. So how can people get involved then in terms of actually going through what you offer? How do they do it? How do they get involved? How do you support these young people understanding more about this space?
Yeah. So it's really amazing because we've kind of taken all of the accessibility issues out of peer-to-peer mental health training. Like, it's free, it's online, it takes an hour. You can do it from anywhere that you have internet access, on your phone, on your computer.
Yeah.
And that's what we were hoping when we went to schools. It was like, we've taken all the excuses away. What can you possibly say to us? But that's another conversation. So
Part 2.
Yeah, literally. So we reset the clock a week ago.
Okay.
Because we launched round 2 of the peer-to-peer mental health first aid training. It's now called Good Mate Training. And we had to update the research because the Australian Psychological Society released new data after COVID, essentially. And so we integrated all of that. Our psychologist, Amy Kate, she works in the Mindful Collective up in Brisbane. She sees young people every day. She and her team worked on that. They got that done in like September last year. And then we actually converted that into a script. We then went to Instagram HQ to film it in their studios. So many people worked on it. And then now it's become this online version that will become an app as well in a few weeks when the App Store gets their shit together.
Apple, if you're listening.
And it's great. Like, it's really good. It takes like 50 minutes on average to finish it. You then get your certificate in peer-to-peer mental health first aid training. So you can slap that on LinkedIn. People are sharing their certificate on Instagram stories and tagging us. In a week, we had 270 people go through it.
Amazing.
Which is so great. And that's with help from our creators. So you can really just find us on Instagram. Like, that's where we direct everyone, not our website, like whatever, AllKnd.org, whatever. Come to our Instagram because that's where we mostly hang out. AllKnd. You'll be able to find us with a blue logo. You'll see all of our friendly creator faces and our team. And that's where we have like all of our conversations and our fun and our inside jokes and our good content, including, you know, helpful resources that are actually interesting and helpful. And yeah, from there you can get online and do your free mental health training, and you'll be a better mate because of it.
I love that. And we'll leave links obviously in the show notes to all of that, because I think it's such an important cause, something that I am so deeply passionate about. So thank you for everything that you're doing in that space, because it is unfortunately, you know, with my experience, not only lived experience, but experiencing losing people to and mental health illness, it is something that is so deeply important for me to instill, not only in my team, but everybody around me, everyone in my family, even educating up to like my family and my mum and dad who perhaps, you know, it's not their fault that they weren't taught to talk about it. It's not their fault that they don't know about it. So I think that everyone has a role to play, and I think you're playing such an important role in that. So thank you. Before we finish, I have 3 questions that are quick fire questions. I ask everybody these questions before we wrap up. And the first one is, name one brand that comes to top of mind.
Go-To Skincare.
We love them.
I just love their obviously founder. She's got an incredible founder story, Zoe Foster Blake. But they have a really kind of nimble, agile team that's always working to create their brand story, build their brand story, and grow with their audience as well.
Yeah, I love that. what is one thing that you think helps keep a business or a brand top of mind?
Oh, behind the scenes stuff and the founder story as well. Exactly what we were chatting about before. People want to engage with your triumphs and your troughs and everything in between and, grow alongside with you as a brand and as a human.
I love it. And lastly, because I'm obsessed with quotes, what is a quote that is top of mind for you? It doesn't have to be like deep in wisdom. It just can be a saying that you refer to throughout the week, because I have hundreds that I throw out.
I think this one goes back to what we were talking about before, and I shared this last year on my birthday, and it kind of resonated with a few people. Let others say no to you before you say no to yourself. Like, ask anyway, even if you think they're going to say no, because if you don't ask, you're saying no to yourself before they can say no to you. Like, stop beating them to it.
Yeah.
Like, what is that about?
Yeah.
And I try my hardest. It is so hard, but I try to live that every day in business and in life.
I love that. Milly, thank you so much for joining me. I've loved chatting. I could honestly sit here for another hour
Let's
or
do
two.
another one.
Let's go part 2. We'll have to have you back for part 2. Speak specifically founder like stories and things like that, because that's also something that I'm deeply
and
interested
campaign
in.
stuff. I love talking about strategy, creative
Oh my gosh,
stuff.
let's do 3 parts.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
One last thing from me. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love if you could leave us a review or hit the subscribe button wherever you are listening or watching this podcast.